The room was tense. Cameras flashed, and reporters scrambled for the best angle as Elon Musk stood before the packed press conference. The weight of the moment was palpable. Today was the day he would tear the veil off one of Washington's most powerful figures. It was the day Nancy Pelosi would be exposed. For weeks, Musk had been gathering evidence. It wasn't just hearsay, it was hard data, facts, and insider testimonies that would make the most hardened political minds shudder. And today, the world would know the truth. Pelosi, the Speaker of the House, had been a fixture in Washington for decades. Her power had seemed invincible, until now. Musk had uncovered something the public had been blind to, something that had been hidden in plain sight. With one tweet, the man who revolutionized the tech industry was about to bring the political world to its knees. "I have the truth," Musk said, his voice firm, as he glanced over at the waiting reporters. "And what you're about to hear will change everything." The screen behind him flickered on, displaying a series of documents, financial records, and video clips. There was no denying it anymore. Pelosi's involvement in covert dealings, financial corruption, and manipulation of public trust had all been laid bare. The truth had finally come out, and it was more damning than anyone had anticipated. But what was most shocking wasn't just the contents of the revelation. It was the way Musk had played the game. Everyone knew he was unpredictable, but this was something else. As the documents flashed across the screen, gasps filled the room. Reporters whispered urgently among themselves, trying to process the magnitude of what they were witnessing. Musk stood there, unmoved, letting the silence linger before speaking again. "These are not just rumors," he said, his voice now cutting through the noise. "This is hard evidence. Pelosi, over the years, has been at the heart of a web of corruption, manipulating legislation, pushing policies that benefit her own interests, and silencing anyone who stood in her way." The screen changed, now showing a hidden video clip of Pelosi in a private meeting. The footage, shot in a dimly lit room, captured her discussing a multi-billion-dollar deal involving several powerful corporate interests, all while promising favors in exchange for political backing. Musk's team had worked tirelessly to get this footage, and now, it was out in the open. "These are the people you've been voting for, America," Musk continued. "She's been operating behind the scenes, all the while pretending to fight for the people." A murmur rippled through the room as reporters scrambled to fact-check and verify the information. But it was too late. The damage was already done. Musk had already dropped the bombshell, and there was no going back. "This isn't just about power," Musk said, pacing in front of the camera. "It's about control. Pelosi has been controlling the narrative for years, shaping laws to fit her personal agenda, and using her position to silence anyone who tried to expose her. But no more." As the footage continued to play, showing even more shocking evidence of Pelosi's involvement in backdoor deals with some of the wealthiest elites in the country, Musk leaned forward, locking eyes with the cameras. "It's time for the truth to come out. Nancy Pelosi is no longer untouchable." The room was now in chaos. Reporters were frantically typing on their phones, trying to get the story out before anyone else. Social media was already exploding with the hashtag Pelosi exposed trending worldwide. Musk's revelation was going viral in real time, and the political world was scrambling to react. But Musk wasn't finished. He had one more bombshell to drop, something that would send shockwaves through the entire nation. He clicked a button on the podium, and the screen changed once again. This time, a series of encrypted emails appeared, correspondence between Pelosi and several powerful lobbying groups, outlining how they would work together to suppress certain bills, all in exchange for massive donations funneled into her re-election campaign. The emails were damning, and it was clear that Pelosi had been using her position to line her own pockets while pretending to champion causes for the public good. "This is what she's been hiding," Musk said coldly, his eyes never leaving the screen. "A pattern of deceit. A career built on backroom deals, personal enrichment, and a complete disregard for the people she was supposed to represent." The room fell into a stunned silence as the full scope of the corruption became clear. Musk's team had even uncovered secret financial transactions, transfers that led to shell companies tied directly to Pelosi's family. It wasn't just about political power, it was about money, wealth, and influence that had been systematically funneled into her pockets for years. Now, let's talk about accountability, Musk continued. Pelosi might have thought she was untouchable. But every empire falls, and this one's coming down. It's time for justice. As he said those words, a wave of realization swept across the room. Musk wasn't just making an accusation, he was leading a crusade to dismantle the old political order, and Pelosi was its first casualty. The press conference had transformed from a mere revelation into a political earthquake. While some reporters were trying to question Musk about the validity of the evidence, others were already making calls to their editors, confirming that what they had just witnessed was far from a hoax. The full extent of the scandal was starting to unfold in front of them, and there was no escaping the gravity of the moment. Musk's tone shifted. He was no longer just exposing corruption, now, he was calling for immediate action. This is not just about Nancy Pelosi, he said, his voice low but filled with authority. This is about a system that's been rotting from the inside for years. It's about a government that has been bought and paid for by the elite, leaving everyday Americans in the dust. And it's time to put an end to it. As he spoke, a team of lawyers entered the room, carrying stacks of documents. They handed out copies of the evidence to reporters, ensuring that the full scope of what had been revealed would be accessible to the public. Musk's legal team was already preparing to file lawsuits, demanding investigations into Pelosi's actions and those who had enabled her rise to power. "I'm not just going after Pelosi," Musk declared, looking at the sea of reporters. "I'm going after every politician, every lobbyist, every corrupt figure who has profited from the dysfunction they've created. This is about draining the swamp, not just exposing the scum that floats on top." It was clear that Musk wasn't just an entrepreneur anymore. He was now positioning himself as a political disruptor, one who was willing to take on the very heart of Washington's power structure. And with each passing minute, his message was gaining traction, not just among the public but within the halls of government itself. Senators and House members were already beginning to comment on the scandal, calling for investigations and denouncing Pelosi's actions. But Pelosi wasn't going down without a fight. Her spokesperson quickly issued a statement, calling the evidence presented by Musk fabricated and taken out of context. Pelosi herself was expected to address the nation in a televised speech later that evening, but it was clear that the damage had been done. Whether she could salvage her reputation or not, the seeds of doubt had been sown. The hours that followed Musk's press conference felt like a blur, as the political landscape shifted beneath everyone's feet. Social media was ablaze with debates, some defending Pelosi, others calling for her immediate resignation. The revelations had ignited a firestorm, and the flames weren't dying down anytime soon. At the heart of it all was Musk, who was now being seen as both a hero and a threat. His ability to expose the corruption that had plagued Washington for decades was undeniable, but many political insiders were beginning to feel uneasy about his sudden influence. As night fell, Pelosi took to the airwaves, her voice calm but laced with an underlying fury. She opened with a sharp defense of her career, claiming that the evidence presented by Musk was either fabricated or taken out of context. "This is an attack on me, yes, but more importantly, it is an attack on the American people. These accusations are false, and they are part of a larger, coordinated smear campaign designed to undermine my efforts to serve the people of this nation." But even as she spoke, the cracks in her story began to show. Public sentiment was already turning. The evidence Musk had presented was too overwhelming, too carefully corroborated to be dismissed as mere political theater. And while Pelosi's supporters continued to rally behind her, more and more voices in the media and politics were beginning to call for an independent investigation into the allegations. The following day, the pressure on Pelosi mounted. A bipartisan coalition in the House and Senate announced that they would be pushing for a full investigation into the claims made by Musk. The calls for transparency were coming from both sides of the political aisle, and Pelosi's grip on power seemed to be slipping. Meanwhile, Musk's campaign for accountability continued to gain momentum. In an unexpected move, he announced a partnership with several prominent watchdog organizations to form a new initiative aimed at exposing corruption and corporate influence in Washington. "This is just the beginning," Musk said in a tweet. "We're not stopping with Pelosi. The truth will come out for all to see." As the weeks went by, Pelosi's situation grew more precarious. Her allies were distancing themselves, one by one. Some were even beginning to suggest that it might be time for her to step down. The media coverage, once overwhelmingly positive, had now turned into a feeding frenzy. The public's trust in her had eroded. By the end of the month, Pelosi's political career was hanging by a thread. And Musk, the man who had brought her down, was now positioned as the most powerful figure in Washington, not through politics, but through sheer influence and the weight of truth. As Pelosi's political empire began to crumble, the rest of Washington watched with bated breath. The once mighty Speaker of the House, who had dominated the political landscape for decades, now faced an uncertain future. The revelations Musk had uncovered seemed to have struck at the very core of her authority, and with each passing day, her position became more untenable. Behind closed doors, Pelosi was fighting back fiercely. Her legal team had filed multiple motions to dismiss the claims, accusing Musk of slander and defamation. But the public backlash was too powerful. Her once loyal supporters were starting to jump ship, as more and more damning details emerged. Allegations that had once been whispers were now loud and clear, and it was difficult for anyone to deny the mountain of evidence Musk had laid out. Meanwhile, Musk was capitalizing on his newfound influence. What had started as a personal crusade against one corrupt politician had evolved into a broader mission to clean up Washington. He announced plans to run a political action committee, PAC, aimed at funding candidates who promised to challenge the establishment, including those who would work to root out corruption at every level of government. "Politics as usual is over," Musk tweeted. "It's time for a new wave of leaders, ones who actually work for the people, not the elites." The reaction was swift and polarizing. Some hailed Musk as a champion of the people, someone willing to do what the establishment never would. Others, particularly within the Democratic Party, saw him as a dangerous disruptor, someone who threatened the very fabric of the political system. As for Pelosi, her attempts to salvage her reputation grew more desperate. She held several high-profile meetings with her closest allies, attempting to salvage her remaining influence, but it was clear that the walls were closing in. The media, once loyal to her, was now asking hard questions. Even her most ardent defenders were struggling to justify her actions. And then, in a shocking twist, a new whistleblower came forward with even more explosive information. This time, it was an insider from Pelosi's own office, someone who had witnessed firsthand the dealings Musk had exposed. The whistleblower provided even more documentation, emails, and audio recordings, all pointing directly to Pelosi's involvement in shady dealings with foreign governments, further complicating her situation. In a final desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative, Pelosi made a public address. She apologized to her constituents and the American people, acknowledging mistakes but claiming that her actions were misinterpreted and taken out of context. "I have always fought for the American people," she declared, her voice shaking with emotion. "I have made mistakes, yes, but I will not be brought down by lies and distortion." But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and her apology was met with skepticism. Even some of her most loyal supporters were beginning to question if they could continue to stand by her. As the days wore on, calls for her resignation grew louder. The House of Representatives, once firmly under her control, was now starting to fracture. The very system she had built to maintain power was unraveling before her eyes. It was clear, Nancy Pelosi's political career was over. By the time Pelosi announced her resignation, it was almost anticlimactic. The once dominant force in American politics had been reduced to a shadow of her former self. In a brief statement, she announced that she would be stepping down as Speaker of the House and would not seek re-election. The news hit the media like a thunderclap, and the political world seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief. Musk, however, wasn't celebrating. The battle was never about personal victory for him, it was about dismantling a system that had allowed corruption to flourish unchecked for far too long. He had ignited a firestorm, but he was only getting started. As Pelosi faded into the background, Musk shifted his focus to what lay ahead, a political revolution. "Change is coming," Musk tweeted, his words resonating across the globe. "The corrupt establishment is no longer invincible. This is just the beginning." Within weeks, the ripple effect of Pelosi's downfall spread through Washington. Other longtime politicians who had operated under the same veil of secrecy were beginning to feel the heat. Musk's campaign to expose corruption and push for greater transparency in government was gaining unprecedented momentum. He had created a new breed of political activism, one that didn't rely on traditional campaigns or party lines, but on the pursuit of truth and justice. The following elections saw a wave of new candidates, many of whom were backed by Musk's PAC, challenging entrenched politicians who had been in office for decades. It wasn't about party affiliations anymore, it was about accountability. And the public was hungry for change. Pelosi, now a figure of the past, became a cautionary tale. Her resignation was seen as the ultimate defeat, not just for her, but for the system that had allowed her to rise to power unchecked. Her legacy was forever tainted by the scandal that had engulfed her career, and she would never again hold the influence she once did. As for Musk, he remained a polarizing figure. Some saw him as a hero, while others viewed him as a dangerous disruptor who had crossed a line. But one thing was certain, his actions had changed the political landscape forever. The world was watching, and the era of political dynasties, hidden corruption, and backroom deals was officially over. The truth, as Musk had promised, had come out. And it had torn down the old guard.